It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Computer says no. A global tech outage causes chaos as it hits systems all around the world. Airline passengers, patients, banks and broadcasters all struggled after a software update caused a day of mayhem.
Obviously sad, disappointed. Just concerned on how you get rebooked. It seems like a madhouse.
The CEO of the company responsible acknowledged it would take time to fix.
Some of the systems that aren't recovering, we're working with them. So it could be some time for some systems that just automatically won't recover.
Also tonight from Washington, the tug of war over Joe Biden's future. More Democrats call for him to stand down. And the Wall Street Journal reporter sentenced to 16 years in a Russian prison. His employer calls his trial a sham.
Plus, police in Leeds appeal for calm amid fears of another night of violence in Hare Hills. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. It was a single update from one company that led to a major tech outage that took down computer systems all around the world. Millions of people confronted by a blue screen of death. GPs, planes, banks and TV channels, including Sky News, were amongst those affected. A wake-up call, perhaps, for our interconnected way of life. So what went wrong? The cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike confirmed it was a software bug rather than a cyber attack which caused the problem. Well, here's what we know. CrowdStrike said the error was caused by an update that it pushed to Microsoft Windows. It was a tiny piece of code, just 41 kilobytes, about the size of a basic web page. But the effects were calamitous. For many of us, the so-called blue screen of death was the first sign of trouble. Then a rush of reports about Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365 going down. Many of those early reports came from Australia and Asia. Then, as the rest of the world woke up, it was quickly clear that the crisis was widespread. Many sectors were hit, including airlines, banks, retailers, GPs and hospitals, along with Sky and other broadcasters. CrowdStrike saw an immediate financial consequence, with billions of pounds wiped off its value. Tom Clark looks at the scale of the incident and what went wrong.
Across the world, computers greeted their users with the blue screen of death. Unable to start systems, locked in recovery mode, airport check-ins, railway stations, payment systems, health services and broadcasters were severely disrupted, including Sky News.
A major global IT outage is impacting many of the world's largest companies, including us here at Sky News.
The outage was specific to computers running Microsoft Windows, but only those using a third-party protection software made by leading cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike. Inadvertently triggering what may be the largest IT outage in history led to a frank apology from its CEO.
We're deeply sorry for the impact that we've caused to customers, to travelers, to anyone affected by this, including our companies. So we know what the issue is. We're resolving and have resolved the issue now. It's recovering systems that are out there.
Despite CrowdStrike's transparency and speed at issuing a fix, global disruption was inevitable. 70% of the world's computers run Microsoft Windows. CrowdStrike makes some of the most popular security products for them. It could take painfully long to recover.
We're definitely seeing one of the largest prolonged impacts, and certainly with the largest consequences for restoration. You know, this is not an easy process to put back together again. Where this has affected all the endpoint devices, which are now all over the world, millions of them. Someone's got to get to that laptop and actually sit in front of it and boot into it and reboot it, and that is a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time.
It could have been worse. Linux and Mac software were unaffected. Core IT for cloud computing, critical infrastructure and the internet soldiered on. The impacts of this IT meltdown are virtually indistinguishable from a large-scale cyber attack and raise exactly the same questions about how vulnerable our society is when it's reliant on proprietary digital infrastructure made by just a handful of big tech companies, and how best to recover when something goes wrong with one of their products. Once the world reboots after this Blue Friday, many everyday businesses will be rethinking their digital risks. Tom Clark, Sky News.
For people across the country, there was frustration, disappointment and financial costs. Hundreds of flights were cancelled or delayed. And while larger corporations may more easily be able to absorb losses, small businesses say they can't even measure the damage. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso looks at the UK impact.
This is what check-in looks like at Edinburgh Airport when the computer says no. A stool, a list, a pen and a very long queue of frustrated holidaymakers trying to get away.
This is the worst part because it's actually my fiance's birthday and our anniversary as well. And so we'd booked for a concert tomorrow. We're supposed to be there today. We don't know what to do now.
My niece's wedding is tomorrow in Germany, and we were looking forward to see all of my side of the family. And I didn't know anything about any problems until we arrived here.
Well, obviously sad, disappointed. Just concerned on how you get rebooked. It seems like a madhouse.
Airports including Heathrow, Luton and Manchester and Ryanair were among businesses most affected by the small software update that had huge global consequences. Major retailers were impacted, with Morrisons and Waitrose briefly unable to process card payments, and this central London Nike store closed, disappointing customers. CrowdStrike's error was disastrous for smaller companies too. This West Midlands food distributor has been processing orders by hand since the update.
It's been a huge headache. We've got over it. You know, I mean, obviously, we can't measure the damage as such. It's going to be the middle of next week before we get everything back up.
The railways feared a day of disruption too, but millions of travellers may have got away with it.
14 train operators are affected with interruptions to passenger information and some services, but the disruption clearly could have been worse. So this outage is a reminder and perhaps a warning of just how vulnerable railway lines, airlines, banks and supermarkets are. They're all built on digital foundations that can be connected.
The focus now is on how a critical industry proves so vulnerable.
This is a webcam call for the global cybersecurity and technology community. It shouldn't be seen as a single incident. It should be used as another way to work towards new methods in order to help protect our global economy.
While Microsoft braces for difficult questions and the industry ponders how to prevent a repeat, consumers and CrowdStrike's customers will begin a tussle over compensation and who exactly should pay that will be counted in the millions. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Well, across the NHS, one hospital declared a critical incident and patients were warned of long waits, appointment cancellations and delays in getting medication. Thousands of GP services found their systems unusable. Laura Bundock reports now on how health systems were hit.
When GP Dave Trisker logged on, this message popped up. His Surrey-based surgery's entire records were down.
We've not been able to access patient clinical information, so for their medical history. We've not been able to prescribe medications in the normal electronic way. We've not been able to make referrals. We've not actually been able to manage how we would normally manage incoming patient demands.
And that's had a huge impact on patients. The waiting room should be much busier, over 200 appointments booked in, but only 20 people came. The rest cancelled.
First thing, I went online to do a repeat prescription, and the system's usually really, really good because, you know, the doctors answer more or less immediately. And so I went online on the app and it said there was a computer outage.
Over 3,500 GP practices were hit with similar problems. The new health secretary, facing his first challenge, posted, "This is having a particular impact on GP appointments and electronic prescribing. Please bear with your local GPs if they're grappling with this on top of normal pressures. My department is working closely with colleagues across government." Some hospitals have also had issues. The Royal Surrey NHS Foundation declared a critical incident, with cancer patients told their radiotherapy was being rescheduled. This outage has caused havoc for healthcare. GPs left writing patient notes with paper and pencil. Modern medicine looking old-fashioned, with little immunity from the pain of IT issues. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Surrey.
Well, from Australia, where the problems were first reported, to the United States, the tech error has caused a day of mayhem which spread around the world. From ordering coffee to getting on a plane or train and even accessing critical healthcare, the online systems that we all rely on collapsed. Our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, reports on a world that became disconnected.
Across Europe, a wave of disruption, seen most clearly at the airports. Here in Berlin, long queues and simmering anger on one of the busiest days of the year. The problems hit some airlines harder than others, but the overall effect was a miserable double act of delays and uncertainty, of plane tickets being written out by hand because the computers weren't working.
Airport guys are saying just to check the airlines' websites. They are not giving any clear-cut information.
And what are you going to do now?
I don't know. Tell me you, please. I'm asking help.
Also stuck in Germany, one of the nation's top divers trying to get to Paris for the Olympic Games.
We're on our way to Paris, and now we're at a standstill here for the time being.
The Olympics start in a week. The organisers admitting the computer outage had affected their plans, but insisting the Games will go on. The impact was manifold. Hospitals in Belgium, social security access in the Netherlands, a reminder of how dependent we are on computers and the web.
Please wait on the passenger lounge. We're not checking right now.
This was a problem that started with a software glitch in the US. America saw the impact up close. Flights were grounded, business deals halted. There were even problems connecting calls to the 911 emergency service. The problem, global. Sky News correspondents saw how the world was affected.
The global outage of the internet has affected the Indian subcontinent in a big way. Most visible has been the disruptions in the aviation industry. There were also reports of a number of hospitals that experienced the same. An administrator saying the disruptions in their system had affected critical care, lab tests and machines that are in ICUs connected with the Microsoft platforms.
Australia and New Zealand were the first part of the world to wake up to the news of this IT outage. A similar situation across Asia, in Malaysia, in Singapore, Thailand, Hong Kong, at all of those big airports, delays and frustrated people.
All it took was one software update from one company to cause chaotic disruption around the globe. Ours is an interconnected world, and this was a demonstration of how perilous that can be. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
Well, let's have a final word from our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, who's with me now. And Tom, this just shows how vulnerable we are to digital error and, you know, how widespread it can be.
I think Adam summed it up perfectly there at the end of his piece. You know, we live in this interconnected digital world. Our societies are increasingly reliant on those systems through the companies that we use for our everyday needs, and not just that, you know, public sector services as well that are using the same kind of software. And it raises really profound questions about how we continue, because you can talk all you like about what more companies could do to ensure resilience, but, you know, for your average high street business or even an airline, they're not in a position to be able to sort of air gap their IT and keep it completely sterile for any possible future event. They have to be networked, they have to be connected. Because of that, they have to have security updates installed constantly to mitigate the threat of a cyber attack. Interestingly, what we saw here was, as I tried to explain earlier, you know, we saw similar impacts from this as we would from a cyber attack. So what do? How do we move forward? Obviously, there's lessons learned for companies like CrowdStrike. They're going to be much more careful about the updates they release, and I imagine we'll see that across the industry. But ultimately, I think people have got to recognise these things will happen. How's your business going to work when you lose access to your IT? How are you going to make it? How are you going to stay operational? I think that will be the hardest lesson for a lot of people to learn following this incident, because it almost certainly is going to happen again.
OK, Tom, thank you. Very busy day for you. Thank you.
Good evening from Washington, where tonight Joe Biden is insisting he's still in the race. The number of Democratic congressmen and women asking him to step back is growing all the time, 34 now. But Biden's team say he will be back on the campaign trail next week. The US president has been isolating with COVID, and it's unclear how long he can resist the pressure, as polls suggest he is losing ground on Donald Trump in key states. In an overnight speech at the Republican National Convention, Donald Trump told his audience that God was on his side. Let's speak now to our US correspondent, Mark Stone in Chicago. And Mark, coincidentally, you are in the city where the Democrats hold their convention next month. They are in a bit of a mess.
Yeah, the city where it could all come to a head. Mark, there is a certain sense of insanity about what is unfolding here in America politically right now. First, President Biden, he, as you say, last seen on Wednesday night returning to his home in Delaware, slow, infirm, and with COVID. And now a growing number of his own side are insisting he must stand down, that he will lose the election if he is the candidate. And tonight, joined by some Democratic national security people as well, former national security officials who have said in an open letter, Donald Trump puts your foreign policy accomplishments at risk. We strongly believe now is the time to pass the mantle, and we respectfully urge you to do so. That from senior foreign policy officials. They say he will lose the election. 34, as you say, lawmakers on his own side as well. It is genuinely unprecedented. He is putting his party in an unprecedented position, but he says he will carry on and he will be back on the campaign trail on Monday. On the other side, Donald Trump last night appeared giving his first speech since that assassination attempt last weekend. There was a sense perhaps that the speech would be more unifying. Well, I was there on the ground in the middle of it among the adoring fans, and it was Trump through and through.
Enough was enough, and I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother.
This was the culmination of an extraordinary week for this country, and it was an all-American night, at least for this bit of America. After the wrestler,
thank you for saving the life of President Donald J. Trump.
There was the prayer. Then the re-emergence of the wife not seen for so long.
Save life!
There was the rock star.
Save life!
The build-up was truly through the looking glass stuff. Through into a world where Donald Trump is the king with an entrance to match. And to begin with, it was a Trump we have maybe not seen before.
I said to myself, wow, what was that? It can only be a bullet. And moved my right hand to my ear, brought it down. My hand was covered with blood.
There was a scripted vulnerability after Saturday, an emotion from some in the crowd as he recalled the day.
I'm not supposed to be here tonight. Thank you, but I'm not. I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God.
The uniform was a salute to the man killed by the bullet destined for him. From that, there did then come a message which felt different.
The discord and division in our society must be healed. To every citizen, whether you're a young or old man or woman, Democrat, Republican or Independent, black or white, Asian or Hispanic, I extend to you a hand of loyalty and of friendship.
It was undeniably low energy, and then a familiar rhythm resumed. The auto cue lost as he went off script.
From the Democrats, crazy Nancy Pelosi, the whole thing, just boom, boom, boom.
There was just one mention of his opponent.
The damage that Biden has done. Only going to use the term once.
He hit all the buttons, the fake news, the China virus, the witch hunt, the immigration invasion.
I could stop wars with a telephone call.
And on for an hour and a half.
That means two things in day one, right? Drill, baby, drill, and close our borders.
Well, for all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man. And this is why, of course, it resonates here, it works, and supercharged by the weekend shooting.
This is a different President Trump.
A little bit more wiser and probably a little bit more cautious.
And he's going to make America great again.
Still, after the party, when everything settles and if the other side sort out their Biden problem, well, then the focus will shift. It's way too early to assume anything is set. It was quite the night, as you can see. As for President Biden, well, look, I've given up guessing when he might step down, but it does appear now to be the end of the road, or very close to it, for President Biden. And I think here, Chicago, the next few weeks, next month, the Democratic Party convention will be pivotal for the party and for the country.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. Now, the journalist Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal, one of the biggest newspapers here in the United States, has been found guilty of espionage and sentenced to 16 years in prison in Russia. The 32-year-old has been in detention since March last year. Today, his employer vigorously denied the charges and called the trial disgraceful and a sham. Our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett reports now from Yekaterinburg, where the trial took place.
His trial was only 3 hearings, but already a verdict. And no surprise what it was. American journalist Evan Gershkovich convicted of spying against Russia.
The court ruled to find Evan Gershkovich guilty of committing a crime under Article 276 of the Russian Criminal Code and to sentence him to imprisonment for a term of 16 years to be served in a high-security correctional colony.
He's spent nearly 16 months behind bars already, of course, on charges he denies. Evan, we love you, a supporter shouted. A brief wave, then led away.
That was the first time we've seen Evan Gershkovich since the start of his trial, because it's all been held in secret behind closed doors. No media has been allowed in. So we don't know what evidence was produced against him, if indeed there was any.
It's why his employer, the Wall Street Journal, has called the trial a sham. Gershkovich was arrested in March last year, accused by Russia of gathering secrets about a tank factory for the CIA.
Continuing work on a diplomatic solution to his case.
The last American journalist accused of spying by Moscow was Nicholas Danilov in 1986, the height of the Cold War. He was released after 13 days in a prisoner exchange. But a similar swap for Gershkovich may not be easy.
I think that an easy deal would feel like a win for the Biden administration, and that's not something that the Kremlin really wants to give them. Second of all, this is probably the highest ticket item that Russia has in its inventory right now, not to be flippant about it, but they will want to get maximum reward for it.
Responding to the verdict, President Biden said he was pushing hard for Evan's release and that he had no higher priority. Washington accuses Moscow of stockpiling Americans to use as bargaining chips. If so, Russia may be preparing to cash one in. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, in Yekaterinburg.
And that is it from Washington at the end of an extraordinary week in American politics. But the question now, is it also the end of Joe Biden's bid for 4 more years in the White House? This promises to be a crucial week ahead for the Democrats. Gillian.
Mark, thank you. Police in Leeds have appealed for calm after several people were arrested following a night of disorder in the Hare Hills area of the city. An angry crowd overturned a police car and set a bus on fire, with officers forced to withdraw whilst under attack from missiles. Our North of England correspondent Charlotte Leeming reports from Leeds.
A night of violence and chaos on the streets of Hare Hills. Social media footage of the rioting shows the extent of the disorder. A double-decker bus set alight, a police vehicle overturned, officers targeted and residents told to stay indoors for their own safety.
Many people will have seen on the social media some of the really shocking scenes of audacious criminality, and that's why it's really important that those individuals face the full force of the law.
Local councillor Motin Ali was caught up in the disturbance as he tried to stop rioters throwing objects onto a fire.
We stood in front of the police lines, tried to give them some cover and give them, acted like human shields for them, so they could get a safe withdrawal. We took, there were bottles and things being thrown at everyone, so something hit me on the top of the head.
Well, this is the aftermath of last night's violent events. The wreckage of the double-decker bus that was charged, still smouldering this morning in the hot summer sunshine, is now being removed by West Yorkshire Police. But this incident has created a palpable sense of fear in these suburban streets, with many simply too afraid to speak on camera for fear of any repercussions. One father told us anonymously he was heartbroken by the events, both for his children and the wider community.
It was horrible. It was absolutely unacceptable. And I cannot imagine why the people are doing this. I could not sleep all night. I was just, even still you can see I'm crying.
West Yorkshire Police said in a statement, our officers responded to a call from Children's Social Care at around 5 p.m. yesterday after social workers reported being met with hostility when dealing with a child protection matter. Responding officers were attacked and helped withdraw the staff to safety. Witnesses who saw the disorder said it then escalated as opportunists took advantage of the situation. The Prime Minister has condemned the violence and pledged to support police in their investigation. Several arrests have been made after officers came under a barrage of bricks and missiles, and more are expected. The hope now is the community can start to heal and rebuild relationships. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Leeds.
Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for a drone strike near a branch of the US Embassy in central Tel Aviv, leaving one person dead and at least 10 injured. The attack happened at around 3:10 in the morning, reverberating to nearby cities. The strike hit an apartment building near the seafront, just a few hundred metres from a branch of the US Embassy in Tel Aviv. The Houthis, backed by Iran, have repeatedly launched drones from missiles toward Israel from Yemen during the war, but all had been intercepted by Israel or its allies until now. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports from Tel Aviv.
Emergency responders arrived soon after the drone struck. This area was peppered with shrapnel. At least 10 were injured and one man was killed. As people arrived to survey the damage, eyewitnesses described being shaken awake by the blast.
You heard all this explosion and the glasses all over broken and the ambulance and everything, and people are screaming in the street. And the guy, they are telling him, he's dead, he's in the roof.
In this video, which captured the moment, you can hear the whining buzz and make out the distinctive shape of the drone as it darts across the sea. Moments later, there's a fireball as it explodes. The drone struck in the early hours of this morning in this central residential area of Tel Aviv. And although the damage could have been much more significant and the loss of life, this will be celebrated as a major symbolic victory by Israel's enemies. The attack was quickly claimed by the Houthi militants in Yemen. They describe it as part of their campaign of solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza.
We will continue, with God's help, to strike these targets in response to the enemy's massacres and daily crimes against our brothers in the Gaza Strip.
And this strike is raising many questions. The military is investigating how the drone was able to penetrate the nation's advanced air defense systems.
We're in a multi-front war. We work on all fronts and defend the country every day. Some of these fronts are close and others are far away. We work against all threats. We are holding an investigation today and in the coming days to understand exactly from where the threat was fired
and what are the needed responses to defend the country, and what are the attacking responses against who is threatening the state of Israel.
The drone strike comes as the bloodshed in Gaza shows no sign of stopping. The past week has been one of the most deadly since the war began. The health ministry in the enclave says more than 300 people have been killed. And until there is a ceasefire and this carnage stops, the danger remains that this conflict ignites into something far worse. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Tel Aviv.
The UN's top court has said the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories is against international law. The International Court of Justice ruled Israel should stop settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and end what it called its occupation of those areas and the Gaza Strip. The ruling is not legally binding. President Zelensky of Ukraine has become the first world leader to address cabinet in Downing Street since US President Bill Clinton in 1997. He used the historic meeting to ask Sir Keir Starmer's government to allow Ukraine to target sites in Russia using UK weapons. Ukraine has said lifting restrictions on Western weapons, including British Storm Shadow missiles, to strike deep into Russian territory is key to its efforts in the war. That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the writer and broadcaster Esther Craig-Coo. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, of course, this on the front of the Eye. Its headline, Computer Says No. Global IT crash hits GPs, hospitals, banks, planes and trains. Stay with us for more. We'll be right back.